This is the story of a great leader who was a man of high status and grand seats. His estate was surrounded by numerous fields where crops were grown. He spent his days collecting taxes in his city. To be honest, he had no real worries. He was so self-sufficient that he only spoke when he needed to eat. It seemed he was very learned and knowledgeable, and that was true to some extent. He spent most of his time sleeping, drinking, and eating. Day by day, he became more corpulent and increasingly idle. Then a trivial incident occurred that shook his life. He suddenly thought of something while sitting in the palace. One day, the king decided to test him. He ordered his men to bring the great scholar to the palace. When the scholar arrived, the king addressed him, saying, "My esteemed scholar, because you are a very capable man and have the leisure time, I have called you here to answer a few questions. Even if you cannot answer them despite your unparalleled knowledge, I will not be able to help you." The scholar, in a confused and worried voice, responded that he was perplexed by the king's summons. The king said, "My dear, you should not be concerned about this. Everyone says you are so wise and knowledgeable that no one can match you. Now is the time to use your intellect and solve these 3 difficult questions." The king then asked, "How deep is the ocean? How long will it take me to travel around the world on horseback? What is the distance between the earth and the sky?" The scholar was so troubled by these questions that sweat began to drip from his forehead. He could not think of answers and felt utterly confused. He said, "If you deem it appropriate, I need some time to think about these questions." The king granted him 3 weeks to find the correct answers and instructed him to present them in his service without any delay, as he was the most learned scholar. The king added, "Failing to provide satisfactory answers will result in you being dismissed." The scholar left the palace, not only with a heavy heart but also feeling anxious and terrified. He returned to his estate and did not eat even a morsel of food, spending the night restless and troubled, unable to solve the riddles given by the king. Over the next 3 weeks, he was in greater distress than anyone else could have been. He became irritable, lost his appetite, and grew weaker. Despite his best efforts, he could not find the answers to the questions. He sought help from others, hoping they might provide some solution. But no one could help him. His only option was to wait for the day he would have to face the king and admit his ignorance. As the day approached, he felt as if it were the day of judgment. He would have to ride a donkey through the streets with its tail in the air, humiliating himself as a punishment. The scholar wondered if his humiliation would be permanent or if there was any chance of redemption. He thought, while the destiny might be unchangeable, he himself could change his fate. On the appointed day, he donned his old clothes and hat, and set out towards the palace, resolving to do his best. He arrived at the palace just in time. The king was seated with great dignity, surrounded by princes and nobles. The scholar began to answer the questions. He started with the first question, "How deep is the ocean?" He imitated the king's voice and said, "This is a very simple question. The depth of the ocean can be measured by the stone thrown into it. The stone will sink until it reaches the ocean floor." The king, pleased with this answer, smiled and confirmed its accuracy. For the second question, the scholar answered, "The time it takes to travel around the world on horseback depends on the horse's speed. If you travel at the speed of the sun and the horse runs at the speed of the earth, it would take 24 hours to complete the journey." The king, impressed, agreed that the answer was correct. Finally, for the third question, the scholar answered, "The distance between the earth and the sky is 40,106 miles, plus 1 foot and 7 inches. The king laughed and said, "If the result is accurate, you may have your head spared." He was astonished, and after a while, the king said, "You have answered well and your knowledge exceeds expectations. I believe you have the insight to understand what I am thinking at this moment. Honestly tell me what I am thinking, and I will give you whatever you wish." But the scholar said, I know what you are thinking. But I cannot tell you the truth. The king, confused, asked why. The princes and nobles around were also puzzled. The scholar explained that if he had to reveal the truth, it would be that the king was deceitful and unfair. He admitted he was merely an ordinary servant, not the great scholar everyone believed him to be. The king was left speechless, and it took him a while to process the scholar's admission. Finally, realizing the truth in the scholar's words, he accepted that he had been deceived. The scholar, who had been given a chance to show his true worth, ended up exposing the king's deception and proving his own integrity. The scholar returned to his humble life, continuing his duties with renewed honesty and commitment.